Well, I think my story begins a number of years ago when I was deployed for the first time to Operation Provide Promise, which was in Zagreb, Croatia. And we were a pretty tight-knit crew. There was one nurse in particular, her name was Kelly, she was a CRNA and just really had her stuff together. Came across as so strong and so engaging with all of us, so eager to train and to teach lieutenants. And I really looked up to her during that deployment. And then fast forward about a year, I had continued to work with her. She continued to do training in our facility. I was stationed at Travis at the time. And one day as I was heading out to my car, I looked over into the next car and I noticed that Kelly was there. And I remember thinking, oh, this is her secret. She takes power naps in her car and then goes back into work. And she was dressed in her blues and asleep, it looked to be. And something just seemed a little bit off. So I looked, and as you tend to do, and I didn't see that she was really breathing. So I got out of my car and went over and tried to wake her. The door was unlocked, and my first thought was, she's so still. And I didn't want to believe what I was seeing and what I was processing. There happened to be somebody leaning on a car just in front of the car that I had gotten out of. And so I asked that person to go and call 911, knowing that it probably wasn't going to do any good. And then I looked down or was looking rather at Kelly, and she had an IV in her arm. And I realized that with everything else was just not a good sign. I did try and get a pulse. I did try and get to revive her, but realized that this had happened quite a period of time ago. And so there really wasn't anything that could be done at that point. There was a note in the car. I still remember seeing that note addressed to her supervisor, and that was very telling to me as well. What really stands out to me, though, was still, even in that moment, she was proud to wear the uniform and was just completely dressed in her service, not in her service dress, but in her blues with the blue tie tab. I remember that still. But that started a whole cascade of events and a lot of questions, not a lot of answers, having to be interviewed by OSI, having to answer a lot of questions that I didn't know how to answer. And to this day, it's still really a why did this happen, and how could somebody that's this strong see this as the only option? I really looked up to Kelly. I saw her as a very strong woman, very well educated. She was so engaged. She was the type of nurse that I wanted to be with my patients, with other staff members. I think, though, that even strong people sometimes shoulder things silently. And so that, for me, is the piece that I have tried to apply. I don't want to just take things at surface value. If somebody tells me they're fine, I challenge myself to stop and ask another question that will get a deeper answer with folks, and not to be nosy and in their business, but sometimes fine is not enough. And it certainly wasn't with Kelly. I don't know what the trigger was. I don't know if there was something in her personal life, if there was some kind of demon that she was dealing with. I know she was single, but if everybody saw her as a strong officer who had her act together, who was doing so well, perhaps we just didn't do a good enough job in asking her what she needed. I think that as I look back on it now, perhaps it was that strength that we didn't feel that she would need any help, and we didn't stop to ask, how are you doing? And is there anything that we can do for you? And so I think that's one of the things that, I try and apply now is not just accepting the easy answer, the everything's great, I'm fine, challenging myself to stop when I hear that. Well, the military family, as I remember, was very, very good and very, very tight. There were a large number of us that had deployed together the year prior, and so many of us from that special bond when you deploy did come together and did want to know. I was pregnant at the time, so shortly after that I was out on maternity leave, and so I missed some of that initial healing that went on with the unit, but there was a memorial service that I did make a point to be at, and the unit really did check on people and make sure that we were doing okay, that if we had questions. But these were, I think now about all of the things that we do when we come back from deployment, with the questions that are asked and the checks that are done. I'm sure that it's situations like this with Kelly that led to that, because we didn't have all of that in place. But I talked about it. I processed it as I could, and then just moved on. Don't be afraid to ask questions. As the recipient of somebody asking how I'm doing, I realize that's not a threatening question to be asked. So that is one piece of advice. I think the other thing that I try very hard to do is to show my vulnerabilities. And if I'm having a real conversation, that I'm very authentic and genuine. And it's important that people see that I too have struggles, that I have challenges. That doesn't make me weak, it doesn't make me ineffective, but it does make me real. And if I can be somebody that is real, then perhaps somebody will come up to me. And if there are things that perhaps I can share that would resonate with somebody else, I really do try and share that and see that as a source of strength. And the other thing that I've learned from this experience is that I'm really cognizant of who has returned from deployment and or gone through an event in their life that was especially tough for them. And I do try and reach out months down the road, sort of when all of the people have forgotten and we've moved on, but just to see how they're doing. And so that would be the advice that I would give. Just keep in touch with your folks and know them and be looking for subtle changes.